Hello, everyone. Thanks for watching us live today. We are pleased to have Lilian Shen as our guest. Our discussion topic today is going to be arts, diversity, and LGBTQIA plus agenda in China. Lilian is the Artistic Director of Zmack, Shanghai's premier improv company since 2009. Lilian is an applied improv corporate trainer, voice actor, and improv performer. With a background in finance, Lilian has conducted trainings with schools, consulates, and multinational corporations. She's also active in the LGBTQ community in Shanghai. She has organized over 200 events in the last 7 years. She's also the co-founder of Queer Talks, a bi-weekly bilingual discussion-based event, providing a safe space for the community, LGBTQ community in China. She's also part of the founding team of Trans Talks, providing monthly events, resources, and peer counseling for the trans community in Shanghai. Lilian also advocates against gender-based violence in Shanghai, passionate about protecting the rights of women and LGBTQ community individuals. We are very happy to have this leader today, and I think it's going to be a very amazing conversation. So let me add Lilian to the screen. Hello.
Hi.
Thanks for joining us. And well, let's start. Please tell us a little bit about you, about your background. I told many things about you already, but I want to hear from you, your experiences, your roles, your passions, and everything we need to know.
Cool. Thank you so much for having me, first of all. And yeah, I am Chinese, but I was born in the UK and studied abroad. I was spent some time in Singapore, and now back in China for work. So I've kind of been all over the place. And, and I think it was probably in college where I, learned through friends and through different communities about like feminism, about LGBTQ rights. And, it made more sense for me to come back to China to do that kind of work. And I was really happy to, you mentioned talking to Charlene last year, and she was one of the first few community leaders I met with Shanghai Pride. So I volunteered for them. And that's kind of how I got into a lot of the LGBT community and volunteering and advocating and such. And around the same time, and back then I was still in the finance industry. And then, I just kept doing improv. I was in finance, and then I moved to like an in-house for a advertising agency. Then I was in startups for a bit, but then I kept with improv because it was just something I really loved. And, and it's also one of the places that I've been out. And so it was really nice to kind of move and transition my career from, the finance industry into improv. And so now I do improv full time, which is really cool.
Great. That's amazing. I'm glad you are managing to work with what you love in China. What's the scenario for the LGBTQ community in China? What is your view and the importance to create solutions and initiatives tailored for the community there?
It's really kind of been an up and down situation in the last like 5 to 10 years. I think for a long time, like if we were to look like 20 years ago or 50 years ago, of course, like things are so much better now, like at least in terms of like popular culture and people knowing about LGBT, accepting, being more accepting of people, especially if like the lesbian, gay communities. And I would say in 2015 was like the first big change where we saw like before 2015, it was like, you know, more media coverage, more visibility, more events, and it was kind of like growing. 2015, we kind of saw a drop in media coverage of LGBT individuals, and just like any kind of content, right? And now I feel like the last couple years has been a bit of a struggle, just with the ability to put on events and, you know, LGBT venues and such. So it's been a little bit more shaky in the last couple years, for reasons that, you know, I'm sure we all know. And so, you know, it's a fight, but, you know, it's also really important to not give up. You know, Shanghai Pride doesn't exist anymore as of last year. And so that was definitely a huge hit to the community, because they're kind of like an icon in Shanghai. But, you know, other organizations still exist. So this year it's Pride Month. And so a lot of organizations have still come together to try to, you know, put on different events separately during this month to just still have that spirit, that, you know, that visibility for LGBTQ people in Shanghai.
Great.
Yeah.
And what about the, okay, you said you have many difficulties, but what it takes to like build this community with this specific topic in China? Is it hard? What are the challenges?
You know, like from the big picture, LGBT content is still not allowed on national TV. The internet was kind of like the gray zone for a while, where there was a lot of LGBT content, whether it's like independent films or, you know, just like forums online, you know, that people can talk and make connections and be together. And that's why, and this, like, the internet was really a huge benefit to the LGBT community, like 10 years ago, 20 years ago, where it kind of helped people connect again. And then after that, and that's why it's so important for us to have like offline, face-to-face, you know, spaces in real life. And sometimes there are parties, sometimes there are, you know, events at clubs. Me personally, I host a lot of like talks and discussions, because I think, you know, even though it's great to have like social spaces, it's also important to have spaces where people can talk and, you know, make connections that are maybe a bit deeper about conversation, about queer theory, or just share stories with each other. So the difficulty is just, you know, that like the legal difficulties, right? You know, same-sex marriage is not legal, and there are a lot of those kind of difficulties, which will influence the population, because people will see, oh, these laws are not in place, so therefore maybe it's still something that's wrong. And it's kind of like, it's kind of give and take. Sometimes the policies follow the culture, and sometimes the culture follows the policy. It influences each other, right? So there are difficulties where, you know, I have met people who really have never heard of LGBT, or, you know, like my parents' generation, they just, to them, it's just something that's wrong. Like there's no real, you know, like, there's no real like reason. It's just wrong. Historically, you know, ancient China, there was a lot of LGBT like historical figures and things like that. And so, you know, this is a whole another big conversation, but a lot of the influence is possibly religion and all these other things. But yeah, they will say the common rhetoric is that LGBT is a Western thing. It's imported. And so it is, you know, we should, to be nationalist, to you know, protect our country, we should be against LGBT. So that's like something that you hear very often, which is not true. If anything, homophobia is imported. So,
and do you what is the future? How does the future look like for you in terms of this mentality? I know, like, it's not only in China, the homophobic mentality is really a struggle for many countries. In Brazil, where I'm from, is a totally normal thing to be homophobic. It's terrible.
Yeah.
The LGBT community is dying as well, and
Yeah.
but I want to hear from your perspective as a Chinese. How does the future look like for you? Do you think there will be more collaboration, more open spaces where you can develop these ideas in people's mentality? Because it's a kind of an educational action that we have to take.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, in terms of the future, it's hard to say, because sometimes it feels like, oh, we're doing so great, everything's getting better, more and more events are happening, and sometimes it feels like, oh, it's such a struggle, it's so hard, like, why are we doing this? And for me, like, and I think for a lot of organizers, you also have your own life, like, this last year, like since COVID, I haven't been as active as I used to be. Just because my work, I was transitioning into a new position. And so I kind of feel guilty that I haven't been doing as much. But, like, that's kind of like, it's kind of like the journey, because, like, even though I'm not doing as much, there are more and more people stepping up, younger professionals who, want to do more. And it's really nice to see that. And surprising, like, there are a lot of grassroots organizations, there are lots of students who study abroad and come back and they want to do something in local community. That happens a lot too. And so I think the most hopeful thing is seeing more and more people, younger people coming in, and they could be like in their early 20s, just found a job, just got out of college, or even I've met people in high school who wanted to do work and advocate for LGBT rights, and that makes me really happy and makes me really hopeful for the future.
Great. That's amazing. Yeah. And for your industry specifically, you work with art diversity. What are the main challenges for you in this industry, taking into consideration the topics that you advocate for? So do you correlate them in your daily improvs? How is it?
I mean, I don't think in this work specifically there's so much challenges. I mean, in the past, like, when it comes to like at your job or any professional situation, it's kind of like don't ask, don't tell, and I hear that a lot, where it's like it's not relevant to the work, so there's no need to come out or anything. But with my job now, doing improv, it is a creative industry. There are a lot of other LGBT folks in my team, in other improv groups. And so I think it kind of, I don't know, I think it's something about creative industries that allow for your imagination, that pushes your imagination. And I think imagination is really important in empathy. And those kind of industries usually allow for more diversity because people are allowed to be themselves, because when you're on stage, you can be anyone, and I do want, like, I want more women in leadership. I want more LGBT people who are visible. Every year with Zmack, we've done a Pride improv show just to kind of, and like the very beginning, like in 2009, when we first started in Shanghai, one of our first like partner venues is Luca, which is, the iconic gay bar in Shanghai. And they're still one of our partners now, and we've just been very tied to the LGBT community. Like, even if not, like very openly, I mean, we don't say LGBT in any of our file in any of our like promotions or flyers, but we're very tied to the community in an obvious way.
And do you believe that this is becoming a safe space as well? The space that you are creating through Zmack, Is it a space that people recognize as a space for the LGBT community?
I would like to do that more. I mean, I do think there are people who come to our, events who are LGBTQ, and, they don't have to worry so much about being out or whether it's safe. And I think that's ideally what I like. And definitely my role in the community, just because people know I run queer talks, or I do a lot of things in the LGBT community, and that's how people know me. So they see me doing the improv stuff, and it's not like I'm not pushing it, right? I just post stuff on my moments, and they want to join, and I think that's really nice because I think this is not like the improv specifically is not necessarily, oh, it's for LGBT or it's for women or what, but there are spaces that are safe, and you can be yourself, and it can still be something fun and entertaining that you enjoy. We did recently start an all women's improv team, and so that's really nice. And just like small things, I guess.
Yeah, we spoke of, that's great that you're starting the women's group. We spoke about the difficulties. There are certainly many difficulties, but what about the positive sides of starting something like that in China?
I guess the opportunities in China is that, everyone, like if I were to freelance or want to start something new, I feel like China is probably the best place, or specifically Shanghai, just because I know Shanghai the best. Shanghai is a great place to do that. People are more willing to say, hey, give you a benefit of the doubt, attend an event and see how it's like. Then I would imagine like in America or in the UK or, other countries. So, and so that's like a really great thing. I think one of the disadvantages of that is also sometimes you don't know what you get, where you have a lot of people who, because anyone can do anything. Sometimes you also get people who maybe are not trustworthy, or I'm trying to say this in a nice way, but and so I think it's important as a person to kind of be able to tell, hey, like, are you someone who is just good at talking, or can you deliver things? Are you a kind person? And how do I like filter out people to know who to work with, because I think people are really important in terms of the people you work with, the people part of your organization. They make or break a community, because sometimes toxic behaviors can, be very detrimental to a team or to a community.
I agree with you about the opportunities. I think it's a great place to test and and see if it's actually gonna work well. SheUp Community started like that as well. We've been testing for 2 years and it's becoming something else we never imagined, to be honest. But well, we have a question here. We have Camila. She said, I want to know more about the community agenda in China. Do you have something else to say about the community agenda?
I mean, I feel like saying community agenda is a bit strange, just because we don't, we don't sit together and decide, what we're going to do. Everyone is just, it's very small, different organizations. And I think everyone's agenda is different, and that's kind of the beauty of it. Like, some organizations just want more social spaces, want people to have fun and like have a good time, and be safe, and that's why like LGBT venues are so important, with like Roxy, Rank, and Luca. And the venues, the spaces itself are super important. And there are also organizations who are looking for more corporate recognition, so that companies can kind of be at the forefront of having policies for employees that are more LGBT friendly, having HR policies that are non-LGBT discriminatory, and things like that. And there are organizations that have networking events. And like for me, I do a lot of forums and panel discussions. Our next event will be June 26th, where we'll be doing we're calling it Rainbow Day or Rainbow Forums, and it will be like a small discussion on trans issues, a discussion on queer Black issues, as well as generational kind of looking at LGBT elders, and having them share their stories. And so, yeah.
Great. And here Camila is also saying, are these spaces or organizations regulated by the government somehow?
Is this like a sensitive topic for or you guys don't care? No? Okay.
No. I mean, we're
yeah, go ahead.
We are not, I mean, we're just discussing about things that happen everywhere in the world. It's not like I said, in Brazil, we have different difficulties. Yeah. So I feel like people are more interested in learning what are the difficulties in China as well.
Sure. So like the reason Shanghai Pride was closed, I mean, I don't know if you'd say regulated, but the government is aware that they exist. And, Shanghai Pride started in 2009. And so it's just the easiest example I can give. For the longest time, the government was kind of not in support, not against. So they kind of were allowed to exist. And, at first it was run by a lot of, expats and foreigners. So I think, they didn't think of it as a big threat in any way. And then I guess maybe because they got too big, but in 2000, so this is 2020 or 2019 was when we're kind of like, the requests from the government were becoming more and more specific and difficult to achieve, and which, basically meant that they would get in trouble more easily. And so that was kind of one of the reasons they were closed. And with other organizations, again, I wouldn't use the word regulated, but the government is aware that they exist. And they have faced, I have like with Queer Talks, I faced difficulties, specifically when we put on our last big event, which was, right after the pandemic, and it was on Black Lives Matter. And so that actually got a lot of negative attention. And I wasn't called specifically, but people around me were called and asked to not to shut down the event, but basically, they were just like giving them problems, right? And I think the venue was as well. So, yeah.
Yeah, great. Moving on to our questions, right? Basically, next question would be how to break gender stereotypes in doing this kind of work, especially the community management as a professional in China.
Mm-hmm. So like in terms of like my professional work, like with doing corporate training or running an improv company, I think being a leader who's a woman and who's queer, and kind of having, sorry, I'm seeing the question here now.
No, you can keep going.
Okay.
You can keep going. It's just a nice comment that this person.
Okay. Um, so yeah, I think like because I did not found this organization. Kurt Mabry founded it in 2009, and I took over in about 2019, like middle of 2019. So I think at first it was quite stressful, you know, like suddenly going from like a supporting role to managing like a ton of people, feeling responsible for other people, other teams. And that was definitely difficult. And my first reaction was kind of to like be like Kurt, to have a leadership style that's like him, you know, be strict, have discipline, and like all these things. And then I realized it's not my personality, it's not my style. And I was like, you know, I can just be myself. I can run things and be a leader in my own way. And I've been a leader with, you know, with Queer Talks and other communities. And um, I like to be empathetic, and I like to help people not feel so stressed, even though it is our job, or you know, it's work, or we have to have an event at a certain date. I like to take care of people, and so that's just kind of my style. And you know, I think so far it's worked quite well. It's still definitely a lot of stress, but I think that's, you know, one of the things, which is like I feel like there is a gender stereotype about what leadership is. Like most people use characteristics that are very often associated with masculine characteristics, right? And I think it doesn't have to be that way. There are many kinds of leadership styles, and there's no one that's right or wrong. And it's just yeah, at the end of the day, I think it's just about being yourself, and yeah, and figuring out the problems as they come.
Yeah, and this relates a lot to what I wanted to ask you next, in terms of your community plans and how would you like to influence. I feel like you already replied saying that you want to bring another style of leadership that
Hmm.
people will see you as a role model, maybe an influence for the good, and keep bringing the topic to Chinese society as something that brings safety to the community. But you
Hmm.
can complement if I'm right.
Yeah, I mean that's pretty much it. Um, but yeah, like I mean, also with the comment on the live stream just now, it is like sometimes it feels like a paradox, because I do feel like I feel safe, you know, as a cisgendered woman, um, in China. But I've also met people who are, you know, and I think this is like the thing about privilege, which is like what is visible. I've met women who were lesbian and they might appear more masculine, or specifically trans folk in China who have much more difficulty than I would if I were to, you know, just walk on the street or even hold hands with a girl. Um, like most people don't ask or do anything, but I have heard of, you know, trans women, or you know, more masculine representing women, have like having violence inflicted on them, and etc. And with trans issues specifically, the biggest obstacle for them is still coming out to their family. And I mean, this is just from my understanding, as I'm not trans, but there's a lot of domestic violence that happens at home or and you know, and it's just you don't it's not talked about a whole lot. In 2017 they made the first trans national survey in China that was supported by the UNDP and Beijing LGBT Center, so you can find a lot more statistics on that, whether it's on domestic violence or on the mental health of the community. And also with mental health, sometimes it's invisible, you know, like if you face issues at work, if you face issues at school bullying is a huge issue because they're minors, they're children, and they, you know, schools don't have an LGBT anti-discrimination policy. They don't know how to deal with it when it comes up. Or their school might have their own opinion on, if LGBT is okay or not. And so, yeah, there's just like a lot of areas. I mean, I'd imagine if you were to work in, say, like, an American company or, an international company, maybe they have LGBT policies that protect you, but most companies in China won't. And so that's definitely a difficulty. And yeah, and like, if you're not, like, for instance, if you don't speak English so well, then you probably can't work at an international company, and then your options are limited as it is. Or if you don't have higher education, there's a lot of class issues that comes with this as well. Being in Shanghai would be different, I'm sure, from being in a second, third, or fourth tier city. And so, yeah, it's not like, it's not the same everywhere. And there are also like micro communities that could be different as well.
Exactly. There are, yesterday I saw something that we can remember from what you're saying, is that there are many Chinas in one China.
Yeah.
Different realities. And there is one more question here. I don't know. Is it hard to fight for the rights of the community, LGBT community people in Asia? I think it still faces the widespread persecution and anti-gay rhetoric.
I think that's a great question. I met someone like a couple years ago who was a researcher on LGBT communities in Asia. And she told me that China has probably one of the most active LGBT communities, like in terms of like the number of events that's happening, corporate partnerships that we get, like with Shanghai Pride and etc. And I'm glad that China is, so active, and it really shows something, I think, that the community, despite like, legal challenges or, policy challenges, it's still that it's still alive, that people and communities and volunteers are taking time out of their job and all the free time that they have to do this, because it makes, like, I feel like as someone who is queer, it makes me happy to do that. Like, it is better for my mental health to create those queer spaces and to have queer spaces provided for other people. But at the same time, like, that's like the reality we see in China, which is it's still hard. There are still struggles. There are a lot of legal and political struggles. It is definitely much harder in a lot of other places in Asia. And so, yeah, and like, it's definitely difficult, especially when you work so hard to do something and you are told that, it's wrong, or that you cannot do this anymore, or it gets shut down before it can even happen. It definitely feels very, like, discouraging. But, like, again, from what I said before, like, people don't stop doing it, and I might have, like, mental health is super important, and doing this can take a toll on your mental health. And sometimes I feel like I just can't do this right now. But that's why it's important to have a community where, like, I might need to take a mental break for a week or 2 weeks or a year, but other people will step in and support you and be continuing the work that we do, and so the community aspect is just so important.
I agree. In many topics, I think community work is socially important in any country. It's not about China. It's not about Brazil, but it certainly helps. Like Camila is also saying here that the reference that we have, she's also from Brazil, is a much worse reality, because I have gay friends that cannot be. They just can't
Yeah.
be themselves in Brazil because we have this whole situation, violence in the country, and it's 2021.
Yeah.
Whereas she just said here she's married to a woman in China, and she have never
Mhm.
been to a safe place just like she have in China.
Mhm. Mhm.
But yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, I'm glad you guys share about that because with Queer Talks, we keep our events bilingual because we think it's important for, you know, people who are visiting China to understand what it's like in China, but not just Shanghai, different cities in China that would have different realities, but also to understand what's happening internationally. Because most people, if they look at the news, they see America, they see UK, right? They don't think of the other countries, like what's happening in Ukraine or what's happening in Mexico or what's happening in Brazil, which every country has its struggle and is a very different reality. Yeah.
exactly. Well, we are coming to an end, unfortunately. If you want to say a few last words to our SheUp community, words of encouragement, and
Yeah. I just want to say you guys are doing great and to keep up the good work. And yeah. Thank you, Camila.
great.
And yeah, and I hope you guys, keep succeeding and keep growing.
Yes, and we can cooperate and collaborate much more through this next year. We see a very positive future. I think we can
Awesome.
co-create a lot of things, and our
Yeah.
topics certainly match in this
Hmm.
China reality. We have a lot to build. I think China is an opportunity as well to, like you said, and I agree, to
Hmm.
build new things, to build new talks, to bring the
Yeah.
different realities to the society. It's a challenge, but everywhere we have
Yeah,
challenges.
there's challenge everywhere.
Exactly. Thank you very much, Lilian.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Bye
Bye.
bye.